Immediately after Sonic 2's release, Sega was already wanting another entry to start development. It's so funny how Sega was so hesitant to make Sonic 2, but suddenly when the series started to be successful, they wanted to make more, but anyway. This time around it was Yuji Naka who wasn't entirely sure about making a new Sonic, not wanting to make the same things again. Which I can respect, but no, it was the promise of working solely with the Japanese half of STI that got Naka not only on board, but was made producer, giving him way more freedom for this project. Yeah, so one thing I left out in the Sonic 2 video is the fact that the Japanese half really didn't like the American half. Remember how I said the US half were used to the 9-to-5 mindset while the Japanese half had their work all night philosophy? Well, apparently rude remarks were being thrown around towards the American half, and yeah, that's really shitty of the Japanese half. The Sonic 2 crew was really just an oddball team, wasn't it? It was like oil and water. It just didn't go well together. I guess they thought the American team was holding them back or something. Furthering this, Naka and Hirokazu Yasuhira, who was director, wanted to make this title a huge ambitious project, larger in scope than any Sonic game before, which was basically what they wanted to do with Sonic 2 originally, which had a lot of its planned content removed due to large time constraints. This new game would be so big that the talk of splitting it into two was being considered during early development. Sonic 3 was seriously so big and innovative that the limits of the Genesis was being pushed to new heights. Seriously awesome. In fact, Sega was also playing around with the idea of having the game being in its own 24 megabit cartridge, which for those who didn't know, sometimes Sega would include bigger games in their own special cartridges. One of these would have been used for the entire Sonic 3 Knuckles experience, which honestly would have been really neat. Getting back on track, the SDI team had a lot of new members coming in from Japan, notably up-and-coming game designer Tashi Iizuka. It begins. Iizuka very much enjoyed Sonic 2, however he thought he could improve the formula by adding more playable characters with different abilities. Sure, Sonic 2 had Tails, but he was functionally no different from Sonic. Yes, he could fly, as we all know, but there wasn't anything in-game that differentiated him in such a way. He just played like Sonic. Adding different characters would heavily increase the replayability, a larger roster that could experience different parts of levels by using said unique abilities. With all that being said, the team agreed that a new rival for Sonic would be introduced. They originally wanted it to be another hedgehog, but instead another internal competition would decide which animal this new character would be. While some new characters were being presented to a select number of children, a Echidna character would be the most popular choice, except for the fact it was green. Kids didn't really vibe with green Knuckles, which led to the color being changed to red. Knuckles the Echidna was born. What made Knuckles distinct from Sonic or Tails was his lack of focus on speed. Instead, Knuckles was a powerhouse. His iconic spiked gloves aren't just used to showcase his strength, he can also use them to break down boulders, walls, and other objects that Sonic can't deal with. Another aspect of Knuckles' character design is his crest, which was originally supposed to be a Nike logo. Sega was trying to get a Nike sponsorship for Sonic 3, but it fell through. The Knuckles crest is a remnant of that. Pretty nifty. This made Knuckles stand out from the rest. Oh boy, did it work. Knuckles is undoubtedly one of the best inclusions in the entire franchise, ranking pretty high on the most iconic Sonic characters in my personal opinion. I love his personality too. Knuckles isn't the sharpest crayon, but he's intelligent in his own way, being the guardian of the Master Emerald, knowing a lot about his island, while wondering about his origin as the last member of his kind. I'm not a fan on how he was treated in the main series, from Heroes up until about Sonic Frontiers. It's like he was the Patrick of the Sonic universe, just a dumb sidekick who is stupid in all aspects, but when Knuckles is done right, man, I love this character. In a lot of ways he reminds me of Piccolo, who was once a rival turned friend, which, spoiler alert, Knuckles starts off as the antagonist in this game, but I think everyone knows that. In all, Knuckles was a fantastic addition to the series. While designing the zones that Sonic 3 would hold, the team took inspiration from the real world, taking notes from trips the group would take on to get away from production. You know the first part of Ice Cap Zone? Yeah, that was inspired off of a real snowboarding trip the team took. Carnival Night took inspiration from local carnivals that were taking place, and I just think that's the coolest thing in the entire world. One of my favorite parts of the Sonic world is how realism clashes with the cartoony world in the most perfect way possible. This takes that and brings it to the next level. 14 zones were laid out for the game. As said earlier, the game was being developed for the possibility of being split into two. However, a McDonald's promotion of all things was approaching fast. Sonic 3 was due to come out in February, so the team needed to hone in on the split game aspect, swap some zones around, and polish the first 6, slap an ending onto the last one, get their Happy Meals on, and focus on the next half. For example, Ice Cap was supposed to be after Flying Battery. Sonic would have used the door after busting through the ship as a snowboard in Ice Cap. The team tried their hardest to make Sonic 3, the first half, stand on its own. Did they achieve this? Well, In February of 1994, on Groundhog's Day, being changed to Hedgehog's Day, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was released onto the world, came out to critical acclaim. No shocker there, most publications not only called it the best in the series, but one of the greatest platformers period. There was very little criticism to be had, but few did mention the game's length. Some felt Sonic 3 was too short for the price, especially compared to Sonic 2, but it didn't take players long to find the level select, which had names of stages that were being planned later for the second half of the game. This was when people started to find out about the entire, this was part 1 sort of deal, and I'll be honest, I couldn't see this any other way. I think this whole ordeal is, well, for one, something that can only happen in the 90s, let's not kid ourselves here. And two, I actually think this was for the best. Let's say for a minute here, Sega did actually do a 24 megabit cartridge. It would have been way more expensive than your typical game, meaning not as many people would be able to experience the game. And before anyone says it, I do know this is going to be Japan only, but that's all we know. They could have been planning this worldwide if this Ronald tie-in didn't happen, but that's just my theory. That being said, Sonic 3 standalone being a success, both review and critic-wise, the team could focus on the next half of the game. The team really wanted people to play the game as originally intended, so they developed the second half's cartridge to be attachable to Sonic 3. Think a tokusatsu-style mecha but with a Sonic game cartridge, which means it's objectively one of the coolest things in the entire world, but no, seriously though, they marketed this as lock-on technology, which means once you lock on the Sonic 3 game cartridge, the entirety of Sonic 3 could be experienced, all 3 characters from the get-go, more bonus stages, and 14 special stages would be played. Altogether, no parts 1s or 2s, just one big game. Knowing that some people might be a little miffed about buying 2 games to get the full experience, Sega added some value to the lock-on gimmick. If you plugged in Sonic 2, you would get to play the entire game as Knuckles, which is wow. The fact that this lock-on thing can affect games that weren't even designed to use was just the coolest thing ever. And oh boy did this marketing work. This blew people's minds back in the day. And you know what? It's still impressive. This blew my mind as a kid. They also wanted to include Knuckles in Sonic 1, but due to some time constraints and issues getting it right, instead it would bring you to this no way screen and give the option to play randomly generated blue sphere levels. And it is actually randomly generated, which means it's literally almost infinite blue sphere to play. Ho ho ho, we will talk about this later. I know this is some hard copium and is likely impossible, but how cool would it have been if this could also work with Sonic CD? Like having an and Knuckles cartridge alongside a copy of Sonic CD to give you Knuckles in Sonic CD. I know it's stupid, I'll stop. But yeah. In October of 1994, Sonic & Knuckles were released to, again, critical acclaim both from fans and critics, this time more emphasis being placed on playing the game with not only Sonic & Knuckles, but Sonic 3. This was the way the game was always originally intended to play, and it's considered to be one of the best 2D platforms ever made for its time and to this day. Now, do I agree with this? But that's it for the history. Let's get right into the game! Why are you looking at me like that?